is even intellectual property rights, which are so controversial in business, you will see that improving as well. Because again, stages of development, first you are a manufacturer, manufacturing for others. Then you become driven by your own consumer goods. We begin to see that as executives. When we used to show up 10, 15 years ago, it was like semi-gods, the Westerners. They brought capital, they brought money, they brought technology. Now we have to be on the same table as equals. Soon, they have the largest research in the world. China is going to begin to invest, and intellectual property will become more important. So corruption will decrease, participation in trade agreements will expand, but will be strategic. I don't think they'll be stupid about it. And intellectual property rights will improve. I think is all driven by economic factors.
Thank you very much.
Andy? To address Gene's question first, the coverage of the Pope was blanket in the U.S. He didn't get that much coverage in China, and what we see in the U.S. is not as important as what the Chinese see. So yeah, they were not entirely happy by the fact that the Pope got so much coverage, but they didn't cover the Pope quite as much as our friends out at CNN. To answer your question on corruption, in the short term, companies have really got to be careful, because part of this campaign in the spring of 2013 is China stopped its don't ask, don't tell about bribe paying. And they went after bribe paying in the pharmaceutical sector, particularly after GlaxoSmithKline. But it was, my experience at least, is they were all guilty of paying bribes and kickbacks. For the first time, the Chinese said, we're not going to just prosecute the doctors, we're going to prosecute the payers, and we're going to go after foreign companies. So foreign companies have to be careful. They also have to be careful because there's a certain amount of indication that the Chinese are paying a lot of attention to foreign corrupt practices litigation in the U.S., and that they are prepared to go after the companies that get involved in the U.S. side as well, a kind of double jeopardy. There's a case involves a company that basically pled guilty to paying bribes in Russia. The Chinese hauled in the company in Shanghai and said, well, if you're doing it in Russia, you're doing it here. And under Chinese law, if you get accused, you can be put on a blacklist in the locality that accuses you, and you are closed out of that locality. The catch is then, if you get blacklisted one place, you could be blacklisted by other people as well. So I think in the short term, you know, Juan may be right. In the long term, the red tape and the corruption may go down. In the short term, the outlook is not that good. As to poverty, the Chinese government has made tremendous progress in lifting people out of poverty. But being lifted out of poverty in China doesn't mean that you are coming into the middle class. And the majority of Chinese are not in and will not be in the middle class ever. Living in the countryside, living in the West, people are poor, but it is not. There isn't a lot of abject poverty, and so the Chinese government has done a reasonably good job of lifting up the floor to the point that it's well within subsistence for a vast majority.
So two comments, one on the TPP and one on poverty. So the trade agreements, I have a different view, I think, than Juan.